Page 62, where it says V'hein bebechinas va'asei toiv, which is a little more than halfway down from the top of the page.
Amen.
By the way, where's Alan?
I didn't see him for a few weeks.
He has another shear.
That's it?
Are you divorcing us?
He said he'll come once in a while, but he got another shear that he's interested in.
It's his loss.
Okay, our loss.
He said he'll be back. I told him, I said, the road misses you terribly. He said,
Yes,
I'll be
good,
back.
good.
Okay.
I mean the lawyer, right?
Yeah.
He's a lawyer.
I laid it in
Ask
him,
good
Rabbi.
questions.
I laid it into
He
him.
used to come to me a lot at my house. He used to come to eat or Torah for years. One time, for a few weeks disappeared. He got married. He went to England. And then divorced, he came back.
I hear. That's Baruch Hashem. It's a solid group here. Okay, let's get started. So, what do we have until now? We spoke about last week that this idea of the Ava Mesuteres, the essential love that every single Yid has for Hashem, that this essential love that we all have for Hashem can stop us from doing any Avera. Because when you think into it, how at our core, how we love Hashem and how our connection to Hashem is more important than anything else. And then we think about how an Avera is completely ripping us off from Hashem, completely separating from us from Hashem, ripping us apart from Hashem. So that gives us the ability to overcome any taiva, regardless of what it may be, any temptation to do an Avera. And now we're going to move to Asei Toiv. Okay, so I'm not going to do any Averas. Because we know if I do an Avera, I'll be separated from Hashem. But what if I'm too lazy to get up in the morning and to daven? So what's going to be my motivation to do that? And that's what we're going to start learning right now. And this also is my impetus also to do everything that I am supposed to do, in the positive sense. Liskaber kari, to strengthen oneself like a lion. The gevura with incredible strength, v'oimetz halev, and courage of the heart. Neged hayetzer, against the Yetzer Hara. Hamachbid es gufay, which makes the body heavy, umapil alav etzla, and causes the person to be lazy. Mebechinas yisayid ha'afar shebenefesh ha'bahamis, which, as we learned in Perik Aleph of Tanya, what is the source of laziness? So, that just like every physical object is comprised of four elements: eish, ruach, maim, and afar, fire, wind, water, and earth. So also, the physical is a reflection of the spiritual, because spiritual entities also are made up of these four, but they're spiritual elements. So the Nefesh HaBahamis is also made up of these four elements, and the laziness of the Nefesh HaBahamis comes from the Yesod HaAfar, comes from the element of earth, heavy earth. Milatriach Gufay, and the Nefesh HaBahamis, the laziness of the Nefesh HaBahamis wants to stop a person from, as they say in Yiddish, matering sich.
Suffering.
Latriach is to do the work, the hard work. Bizrizos. And not only do the work, but do it with zrizos, with alacrity, with a quick step. B'chol mini teirach v'avedas masa, with all different sorts of hard work and labor, b'avedas Hashem, in the service of Hashem, sheyesh bo teirach v'amal, because we know that serving Hashem isn't easy. And the Nefesh HaBahamis comes and tries to make us lazy. Kigain, for example, la'amil b'teirah, to harvin in learning. Lamil means to toil in learning. Be'iyun. In other words, sometimes I'm not interested in learning. I want to go to sleep, so I sit and I learn instead. So that's definitely harvanya, that's definitely admirable. But sometimes the laziness in learning doesn't express itself necessarily in that I don't want to learn, but when I'm learning, I'm not going to learn it be'iyun. I'm not going to completely immerse my mind in it and work work hard, the mental work that's required to grapple with what I'm studying and to understand it in a very deep way. So if I'm learning, because now it's bittul Torah could be, I can learn Shulchan Aruch a whole day. I can also learn. I can read Nach a whole day. So theoretically, I wasn't mevatel Torah. I sat and learned Torah a whole day. But if I have the ability and the capability to learn deeper, then in a darkistic way, in a subtle way, that's bittul Torah. It's not bittul Torah in time, but it's bittul Torah in terms of the investment of myself that I'm putting into it.
But the whole Baal Tshuva, when they start slowly. They cannot go out of it deep.
That's correct. I'm talking about if I am capable of doing more and I do less, then that's a subtle form of bittul Torah. The Rebbe pointed many times to Gemara in Masechtas Megillah, where it says mevatlan Talmud Torah l'mikra Megillah. Now when it comes to reading Megillah, so Allah is that we stop learning and we go read the Megillah. So the Rebbe asked a pashto question. Mikra Megillah is also Talmud Torah. Why is that? Why, what does it mean mevatel and Talmud Torah? You're mevatel Torah to go read the Megillah. Megillah is also Torah. But if someone can be sitting and learning Masechtas Megillah, and instead he's listening to Megillah, that's bittul Torah. So comes the Gemara and says that even though that's bittul Torah, but today I'm Purim, that's the mitzvah and Persumei Nisan, Berevam Hadras Malach. That's what you have to do. But in essence, if I can be doing something and working my mind in a deeper way, and I take the lazy way out, and I read the Medrash says instead, so that's how, what? In a subtle way. It's not in a subtle way, that's bittul Torah, yeah. So the first thing is that we have to work hard be'iyum to make sure that we're studying up to what we're able. In other words, sometimes you sit on the couch and you take a sefer and you scan through it. There's no mental, we all know this, right?
Too much.
Yeah. I'm tired. It takes a lot of energy and strength to say, it's not only I'm spending my time learning Torah, but my entire brain is engrossed in it fully, and I'm working hard on it. It's number one. And then and then that's in terms of the quality, and also in terms of quantity, that you say Torah and you articulate it, you don't stop learning Torah. Well, and as Chazal tell us, the person should always apply himself to Torah, like an ox to the yoke, and like the donkey to its load. So the Chassidim who say that these two things, the donkey and the ox, are an example for the two types, the two things that the Rebbe is saying in terms of learning Torah. What is the ox? The job of the ox, has to work very hard. It has to work very hard. It's a field, and the earth is hard, and it has to schlep the yoke, and it has to the plow. The chamoyer is lamaswe. It goes on long trips. So it's pashat. It has to spend it day and night. It's schlepping and schlepping. So the same thing we said before about learning Torah. One thing is that the work has to be hard. And the other thing is it has to be constant. The hard is the shoyer, is the ox. The constant is the chamoyer, is the donkey.
Can I be himself to something more appropriate? Why dafka behemah?
That's a Gemara. Ilam Yashem Atzmai is not even the Alter Rebbe, Adam Atzmai. I guess what it means is that we have to learn Hirab Avedas Hashem from everything that Hashem created. So if you see a shir, you see an ox dragging a yoke, you have to say, what can I learn from this? Am I Avedas Hashem? Everything we learn from. Excuse me. The same thing when it comes to davening. Okay. Davening is easy, relatively. But to daven b'chol krichi mamish, to daven pashat with one's entire strength, to put oneself into it entirely. We're not only talking about pirush hamilos. We're not only talking about thinking and understanding the meaning and contemplating the meaning of the words, but deeper into to work the mind and the heart to the point that you think about the greatness of Hashem and develop feelings for Hashem.
And not only shaking. A lot of people shaking, but they have no kavanah at all.
So far we know that it says in Pirkei Avos, Al Shloisha Dvarim Ha'olam Moimet, the world stands on three things. Right? Torah, Avodah, Milch Chasadim. So far we had Torah and Avodah. We have to work serve. In Torah he talks about the Bittul Torah and talks about Avodah, davening. And now we're going to go to the third pillar. The same thing when it comes to serving Hashem in monetary areas. For example, and anything similar in the war against the Yetzer Hara and its tricks, that it wants to cool down the person. And it convinces the person, don't be mafkir your money. They say mafkir in English. Don't
be a spendthrift.
Hafkir means it belongs to anyone. Don't disown your money. And it tells you, be careful with your health. Right? Sounds familiar? No, but you have to know, Shalami Neg, we have to stand against the Yetzer Hara, and we have to be mafkir, in other words, money. The Rebbe Rashab says, the Pasuk says, Mishpat utstaka biyakev ata asisa. Which means, so he says, what's Mishpat utstaka? Mishpat is judgment, and tzedakah. He says, before tzedakah has to come mishpat. Before tzedakah, a person has to make a judgment with himself, and make a emes a cheshbon, how much money do I need? Ali b'da emes, and the rest you have to give to tzedakah. So the mishpat comes before the tzedakah. First you have to judge yourself, how much do I need? How much I deserve, and the rest you give to tzedakah. So the Yetzer Hara makes it very hard to do all these things properly, to learn Torah properly, and to daven properly, and to give tzedakah properly. But still, shalami negdei lakavshe karav mi edela adam. Still, to conquer the Yetzer Hara is very practical for a person to do by evoking the love for Hashem. And that we're going to get into that soon. But before we get to that, I want to point something out of here. We notice the Alter Rebbe didn't talk about, I'm lazy, I don't want to learn. I'm lazy, I don't want to daven. I'm cheap, I don't want to give tzedakah. The Alter Rebbe isn't even talking about that. Alter Rebbe is saying, you're learning. Your laziness is that you're not learning deep enough. Or you're learning, but you're not learning lepasik pumim begirsa. You're not, non-stop. You're davening, but it's not b'chol koiche. It's not with all your strength. You're giving tzedakah, but it's not enough. Why doesn't the Alter Rebbe talk about, we're all human beings. Sometimes we don't want to daven. Sometimes we don't want to learn. Sometimes we don't want to give tzedakah. So the Nukud is like this. Now the Rebbe starts off over here talking about va'asei toiv. We talked about sur mirah. We talked about how to avoid evil. We already spoke about. Now we're talking about va'asei toiv. If a person doesn't learn, that's ra. If a person is mivatal a mitzvah saseh, if a person is supposed to be learning and doesn't learn, a person doesn't daven, a person doesn't give tzedakah, that's an aveira. And when a person does an aveira, at that moment he's ripping himself off from Hashem. There's no difference between doing a loisaseh and not doing a bittul mitzvah. So bittul mitzvah was already included in what we spoke about last week in the first part of the Perek. So if a person says, I don't want to learn, I don't want to daven, so what do you tell yourself? What do you mean? I don't want to rip myself off from Hashem. That we already spoke about. The cheshbon we already spoke about. Which is that if you're thinking to yourself that through an Aveda you separate from Hashem, and therefore, Ma'adach, you'd give up your life to go al Kiddush Hashem, Kolshkin, here, how can you so easily give into this and to separate and to rip yourself off from Hashem? So that's all includes the possibility of not doing a mitzvah. Here the Alter Rebbe says something else. If I'm learning, but I'm not learning with enough iyun. If I'm giving tzedakah, but I'm only giving meiser. If I am davening, but it's not b'chol koiche, can you tell me that I'm being ripped apart from Hashem, separated from Hashem? What avera did I do? Which mitzvah didn't I do? This is hidur mitzvah. This is going the extra step. How do I motivate myself to go the extra step? That's what we're discussing over here right now. Not doing a mitzvah, because that was already included in the previous discussion. And it's a different answer also. If you remember, we spoke about how there's yira and ava. Ava mitzvah teres also contains within it a yira. This hidden love I have for Hashem contains a yira. What is the yira that there is? That every time that a person loves something, a byproduct of that love is a fear. Automatic. If I love something, the more I love it, the more afraid I am of losing it. Very good, exactly. So if I love Hashem, I'm afraid of being separated from Hashem. What stops me from doing an Avera? Not my love for Hashem. The fear, which is the byproduct. Because I know that doing the Avera is going to cause that I should be cut off. If I'm lazy to do a mitzvah, I don't want to put on, I don't want to keep kosher, I don't want to, okay, that's kosher's a bad example. I don't want to daven, I don't want to put up a mezuzah, I don't want to learn, I don't want to give tzedakah. So once again over there, what's going to motivate me to do the mitzvah? My fear. I don't have to have love for that. That's the fear, which is the byproduct. The fear of being separated from Hashem, cut off from Hashem. However, for me to go the extra mile on the mitzvah, the fear is not going to help me. There's nothing to fear. If I daven, but it's not b'chol, with my entire koyach, I'm not being ripped, I'm not being cut off from Hashem. I'm doing the mitzvah. Just not doing it in the best way possible. If I am, if I'm giving tzedakah, but it's only without the extra, I'm not being cut off from Hashem. Here's where the love has to kick in. And that's what we're talking, that's the difference between what we spoke about last week and we're speaking about this week. Last week we were talking about what makes us avoid evil. And when we say avoiding evil, that includes both doing Averis or bittul mitzvah, not doing what we're supposed to do. So what motivates us to avoid both of those? That's the fear. The fear that's included in the love, which is a byproduct. And now we're talking about something else. And just like, let's talk about a marriage, a simple mashal. So when a spouse goes against the other spouse, against the wishes of the other spouse, ripping yourself off. When the spouse also abrogates a responsibility that they have, in other words, there's a responsibility they have to their spouse and they don't do it, even if they didn't do anything wrong. But there's something they're supposed to do, they didn't. Also, at that moment, you're being ripped off. You're separated from. But what makes you go the extra mile in your marriage? That's not the fear of being ripped off. That's the love. That's the love that kicks in. It's a different story. So when it comes along your anniversary, so there's certain mitzvah, there's a certain mitzvah say. Mitzvah say to buy flowers, right? Mitzvah say to buy a card. What other mitzvah say? Maybe to take your wife out to a restaurant. And if you miss out any of those mitzvah say, that causes a separation already. But which restaurant are you going to take her to? Is it the one that's adequate or the one that's le'el? What kind of flowers are you going to get? What are you going to write in the card? These things, that's not the yira, that's the ava that comes into play. The same thing in terms of our relationship with Hashem. All these things we mentioned, to go the extra step here, we have to invoke our avat Hashem, the avat soteres. Inside. 3 lines from the bottom of page 62. To stand next to Yetzer Hara, and to conquer it, is something which is highly accessible to the person when he takes the following to heart. That in order to be victorious over the Yetzer Hara and all this, and even more than this, the law says hefchim amish, and to do mamish, the opposite, contrary of what the Yetzer Hara wants, kal mi'oid, is much easier. Mi yisurei misa, Hashem yishmeranu, is much easier than the pain of death. Heaven forfend. Vi yisurei misa, Hashem yishmeranu, hei mekabel ba'avo v'ratzim. And I would accept willingly and with love the pain of death, so as not to be separate from Hashem, afilu lefisha, even if it's only for a moment. To bow down to Avodah Zarah, as we mentioned last week, because theoretically it's only for a moment, because I can do tshuva. But I'd be willing to give up my life even just not to separate myself from Hashem for that moment. The kolshkein, how much more so? Sheyeshli lekabel ba'avav v'ratzon, how much more so should I accept with love and with desire this to do this mitzvah and to do it properly, k'dei ledavka boi, to connect to Hashem la'olam v'ad, forever and ever. I would give up my life not to separate myself from Hashem for a moment. How much effort should I expend to connect to Hashem forever and ever? Because as we're going to see soon, every single mitzvah connects me to Hashem eternally. So if my connection to Hashem is so important to me that I give up my life not to sever it, how much should I invest and how much effort should I put into doing something which will establish a connection which is an eternal connection? How do I connect to Hashem when I do Hashem's will? So in this service, will be revealed the innermost element of Hashem's will, the pnimius of Hashem's ratzon, and with incredible revelation of a leiba hester klal. There's nothing hidden but Hashem's ratzon, as it is when I'm doing a mitzvah or studying Torah. When there's nothing hidden, as I aimed off a nifret klal klal. This is we discussed at length in the previous chapters. When there is no hester panim, then there's nothing separate from Hashem. There's nothing which is an independent identity. And therefore, when I do a mitzvah, which is the pnimius of Hashem's ratzon, then both my nefesh alikis and v'achiyunas and my nefesh abahamis, uluvushein kulan and their levushim, their machshava di bermaisa, miyuchadis betachlis hayichud beratzon ha'elyin v'eirin seif baruch hu kanal, they're all completely united with Hashem's ratzon and the eirin sof, as explained earlier. When I do a mitzvah, I'm utterly one with Hashem. So if I give my life not to separate from Hashem, how much should I give in order to connect to Hashem? And then the next words. And these are words that Rebbe repeated many, many times. V'yichud zeh, and this unity through doing a mitzvah, l'mayla, in heaven, hu nitzchi le'ilam v'ad, is eternal. Every mitzvah that we do causes a connection to Hashem, an absolute unity, which is eternal. Rebbe mentioned it in many contexts, but also specifically in terms of what is the value of doing a mitzvah with a person one time? You know, going and putting on film with someone. What did he do yesterday? The answer is right here. Yichud zeh l'mayla hu nitzchi le'ilam v'ad. Every mitzvah he does is eternal. Why? Ki hu yizbarech u'ritzoynoi l'mayla mazman. Because Hashem transcends time. And not only does Hashem transcend time, mitzvahs are also above and beyond time. In other words, Hashem's ratzon, Hashem's will, which is expressed in the Torah, is also forever. In other words, I might think that Hashem transcends time, but the Torah, as it comes down to us, that already is subject to the parameters of time. No, the Torah, Hashem's ratzon as expressed in the Torah is also transcends time. As it says, that Hashem's words are everlasting. Right? His words are alive and existing forever. And Hashem will never change His Torah. That's a deeper nakudah that the Rebbe is saying over here. We all know that the Torah, Torah is eternal, it's forever. So how do most people understand this idea that Torah is forever? Which means that Hashem gave the Torah, and Hashem decided this Torah that I'm giving is never going to change. Which, by the way, I believe the Ikrim asks, why is that such an important part of Yiddishkeit? Why can't Hashem change His mind? What's wrong with Hashem changing His mind? What if Hashem today decides, based on what's going on in the world today, I want to amend the laws of kashrus. Based on internet technology, I want to amend the laws of Lashon Hara. What would be wrong with that? Yeah.
How would you describe the situation when the Midbar, Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to wipe out the people, only you, and Moshe said, don't do it, Hashem, Yavachu. Didn't Hashem change his mind? Say, all right, of course you said that, I'm not going to do it.
So how Hashem could change his mind is a good question. But that's not really the subject over here, because here we're talking about Hashem's Ratzon in Torah mitzvahs, and that didn't change. That wasn't a mitzvah or Torah. That was that doesn't answer your question, but it doesn't apply to what we're talking about over here. So why can't Hashem change? So most people will understand that theoretically Hashem could change his mind. However, since Hashem, Hashem knows what's going to be in the future. So therefore, when Hashem gave the Torah, he already looked all the way to the end of time. And any mitzvah that he gave, he already decided that it's going to be applicable to the end of time. And he knows all the circumstances. And by the way, there are certain mitzvahs which taka don't apply anymore. You think into it. It's not so silly. Shmita, you have a lot of mitzvahs that we have, din avedivri, which means that Hashem says they only apply under certain circumstances. Korbanos, right? So Hashem, those mitzvahs which Hashem did not say depend on any circumstances, that means Hashem in his great wisdom, when he gave them, foresaw. He said, regardless of the circumstances that will arise, this mitzvah is going to remain pertinent and is going to be important. And that's true on a certain level, but there's a much deeper understanding of this. The reason why a mitzvah can't change is not because Hashem foresaw the future, but because Hashem transcends time. And as Alter Rebbe is saying over here, just like Hashem transcends time, Hashem's Ratzon also is l'mayla min hazman. L'mayla min hazman, if it's l'mayla min hazman, you can't say it applied yesterday and it didn't apply today. L'mayla min hazman is not subject to time. So just like Hashem is l'mayla min hazman, his Ratzon, his will is l'mayla min hazman, and therefore by definition it can't change. And even those mitzvahs which have in it a certain time constraint or certain conditions, that doesn't mean that Hashem, that means that in Hashem's Ratzon it always was that these mitzvahs apply under these circumstances, yes, and these circumstances, no. Nothing ever changes in that way. It always was, the mitzvah always was applicable under these circumstances. Even today, theoretically the mitzvah of Karbanos exists. Just the circumstances that allow for it, that would allow for it, aren't currently there. So when we have over here, Hashem's word lasts forever. What the inner meaning of that is that Hashem's words are above time. They transcend time. Hashem's word as expressed in the Torah, and therefore, the Torah never changes, not because of some sort of technicality that Hashem decided that he's going to look at, it's always going to apply, but because by definition Torah can never change. That is the way the mitzvah is from Hashem's perspective. Because Hashem and the Torah are eternal, and therefore when you connect to Hashem through his Torah, through his mitzvahs, the connection you create is eternal. Ela shalamata, but down over here in this world, hutachas hazman. Over here, we are subject to time. I am subject to time. And therefore, my ability, my ability to relate to this eternal unity is not going to last forever. When I'm doing in this mitzvah, I'm tuned in to this connection to Hashem that I created. And that connection is eternal. But 20 minutes later, if I'm not doing a mitzvah anymore, and if I'm wasting my time, I tuned out of that connection, even though the connection still exists. It's not begilui within me. Down here, I am subject to time. And therefore, in the human term, it's only during that time, when a person is studying Torah, doing the mitzvah, that's when he is in touch with this connection that he created. Because afterwards, if the person is involved in something else, then he did it again. the connection didn't go away, but I'm separating myself from that connection over here down here. What does that mean? If a person is oisik stam in dvarim betelim, she'ein b'em sheirach klal avodas Hashem, which there's no need for them in order to serve Hashem. In other words, if a person after the mitzvah he keeps on doing mitzvahs, or even if he doesn't do mitzvahs, but whatever he's doing is l'shem shamayim, so then he remains connected to that unity of the mitzvah. But if after the mitzvah the person does stam things which aren't l'shem shamayim, then the person becomes disconnected from that unity. Although the unity still exists, l'mayla, that unity still exists. The afal pikein, but still, when the person afterwards, goes back and he does tshuva and he returns to avodas Hashem, l'toiro, l'tfilah, and he turns to davening and to learning, umevakesh mechila ma'Hashem, and he asks Hashem's mechila, al shoyeh efshtei lasagas b'toira, that he could have studied Torah v'lo yasak, so Hashem yislach lo, Hashem will forgive him. K'may merazal, as the Gemara says in Masechtas Yuma, avra mitzvah sei v'shav. If a person is over in a mitzvah sei, which is, for example, bittul Torah, and he does tshuva, leizaz misham, he doesn't move, Hashem meichlon lo, he is forgiven immediately. In other words, the other aveiros are different. It takes time for till Yom Kippur you have to wait. But for mitzvah say, you're forgiven right away. And that's why we ask Hashem for forgiveness 3 times a day. And this is specifically for avoid bittul Torah. You think into it. Why do we ask 3 times a day in davening that Hashem should forgive us? Ask once a day, once a week. Why? Why? In other words, mele the fact that we ask Hashem for our needs 3 times a day, because that's the mitzvah of davening. The essence of davening is to be mevakesh. Tzarachav is to ask Hashem for our needs. But why do we have to ask forgiveness 3 times a day? Well, the answer is, when we're saying Slach Lanu, we're asking Hashem to forgive us for bittul Torah. She'ein adam nitzlo mimenu b'chol yom. Statement. There's no such thing as a person who doesn't stumble in bittul Torah. To learn Torah 24/7 the way we're supposed to is ma'amish avodas hatzadikim.
Each kollel sit down the whole day and learn. It's less bittul Torah.
Does the Beinani do the Sebarim, or does Beinani?
Sorry?
What's the story in the case of Beinani?
Again, there's bittul Torah, there's subtle bittul Torah. The ability to Pasha be able to, at all times, to be able to study Torah, but to the highest level. It's not only an issue of time. He's saying here, this is something which is, and that's why we say Slach Lanu 3 times a day, and Hashem forgives us immediately. And once we're forgiven, we return to the connection that we had when we studied Torah.
The Arabs say 5 times Slach Lanu.
Just like the carbon tamid that was brought twice a day, that was machaper for mitzvah saseh. We spoke about this last week. This is not an instance of a person says, I'll do an aveir, I'll do tshuva, okay, I'm going to be vatal Torah, but I'll say slach lanu. It's not that. As explained elsewhere, Echtav Ashuv is when you're doing the sin, you're like, okay, should I do it? Okay, I'm going to do tshuva anyways. It doesn't matter. That's Echtav Ashuv. No, the tshuva is a good tshuva. We spoke about this last week. But then we say that Ema speaking b'yad that he's not given the opportunity. Hashem gives him no help. He has to push through all by himself. It's like power steering. There's no power steering to the tshuva. If the person's echtav ashuv, you gotta do it. Normally, the moment you start steering, so the power steering kicks in and makes it easier. If a person does tshuva, the Eibishter helps. If echtav ashuv, you're missing the power steering. But that's only.
What's the kapara for Mavatal Mitzvah say? Is there any kapara for it? What about the damage done? How you undo the damage?
That's a ger satshuva perik aleph.
When you can say that shit?
There.
In 3 weeks, we're gonna go right through this.
It's actually harder to fix a mitzvah say than mitzvah loisasa. Actually harder. Because mitzvah say likes to say you did damage. Damage you can fix. Mitzvah say you didn't really do damage. You lost out an opportunity to be mamshech, to bring down godliness here. And that is something which is a lost opportunity. Because what, you can do a mitzvah tomorrow? You were supposed to do that. But that's a different time. But forgiveness, there's a difference between fixing the damage and forgiveness. Forgiveness comes right away. That's what it says. Forgiveness comes immediately, and with the forgiveness comes that you're reconnecting to the unity with Hashem, which you did, which you created through the last time you did a mitzvah or studied Torah. With this we'll understand. Why is it that Moshe commanded in Devarim in Devarim, Moshe tells the Yidden to say Shema twice a day. L'kabel of Malchus Shemaim, as we know the idea of Shema, as the Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos, like Lama Kadma Shema Lahim Shemayat, to first be Mekabel El Malchus Shemaim, and then the El Mitzvah. So Shema is about being Mekabel El Malchus Shemaim. B'Metziras Nefesh. Where's the Metziras Nefesh in Shema? V'yaftas Hashem Elokecha Chol Nafshecha Afilu Neitel Chayecha, right? So Shema is about Mesiras Nefesh. Why is this a special message given to the Dor that goes into Eretz Yisrael? It's in Devarim. If you look before Shema, in the Psukim it says that this is what Moshe says, this is what you keep in mind when you go into the land. Why is that special? Why wasn't it given 40 years earlier? Why is it especially related to the Yidden goes into Eretz Yisrael? Didn't Hashem promise, assure the Yidden, that Hashem would instill His fear, right, over all the enemies? So they, with Mesiras Nefesh, giving up their lives, they didn't have to worry about it. They were going to be victorious. In order to be able to make Chaim Torah mitzvahs, you need Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh means you always have to remember the idea of that I would give up my life. Al Mesiras Nefesh. Sheyiyah kavua b'libay tamid mamish yemam v'layla. Amazing words. It has to be kavua. It has to be, what's the word kavua? Embedded in the heart. Tamid mamish. Always, literally. Yemam v'layla, day and night. It should never move from your memory the fact that what? That you're ready to give up your life for Kiddush Hashem. Why? That is the key to being able to stand up against the Yetzer Hara. To be able to be victorious and over constantly at every time. So this is Moshe's. When the Yidden were in the desert, they were there the Yidden in the desert, they're very high spiritual people. I know that you look in Tanakh and sometimes it doesn't look that way. You look in the Chumash and it seems differently. The Metzias says there was a very extremely... There we go. The Yidden in the Midbar are called a Dur Deya. Deya means a generation of knowledge, but Das also means connection, connected to Hashem. And in fact, they didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael because they didn't want to deal with the Elam Haza and the physicality, the Eretz Eichelas Yishveha, the land that eats up its inhabitants. And they wanted to stay in the Midbar. They wanted to connect to Hashem. Very, very high spiritual people. After Moshe passes away, so what does Moshe, Hashem tells Moshe that you should know, you're going to die. This nation will stand. They're going to stray. It's not going to be the same as it is right now. Right now, the Yidden are in a very helikim matzav. And that's why they need a Shema Yisrael. Once they enter Eretz Yisrael, they have the battle, the real battle which is posed by Eretz Yisrael. The battle of having to go to work every single day, and the battle of having to, to fight for the dollar. And then suddenly the temptations are very strong. So Moshe, the message that Moshe gave to Yidden going to Eretz Yisrael, not because they're actually going to have to die al Kiddush Hashem, they were going to be very victorious, was the key to keeping the Kol HaTorah Kula is constantly keeping in mind Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. I'm willing to give up my life al Kiddush Hashem, which means that to me, my connection to Hashem is more important than anything. I give my life for it. And remembering that is key to keeping all Torah and the mitzvahs.
But he didn't tell him that before he died, that if they're going to Israel, they have to do special mitzvot of Eretz Yisrael that you don't have it in the midbar. He pushed him for, I think Yoshua pushed him for that. Said, you coming now, the
Torah, you have many mitzvahs where it says, B'vayachem ala aretz, or Hayikisav el aretz.
If you don't live in Israel, you cannot do it.
Good, but Shema doesn't make, in other words, Mela, all the other mitzvahs, Bikurim, Chala, makes sense, that they took effect, they went into Eretz Yisrael. But Shema, what's the connection to Shema? Why is Shema something, and that's what the Rebbe explains. The reason why Shema had to be spoken to people who went into Eretz Yisrael, because Beferish was very connected to them. Anyway, so this week's Parsha, it's a little connection to this week's Parsha. Because this week's Parsha begins, Vahi b'shalach parei asa'am. So Hashem didn't take them to the land of Plishtim. Even though that was the closer route. Why? We'll keep on going. Ki amar Elokim pen yinachim ha'am b'reis ha'molchama v'shav Mitzrayim. Right? Maybe they're going to see they'll see Molchama, they'll see battle, and they're going to run back to Mitzrayim. Why would they be so scared of battle? Why would they even be so scared of the battle? They'd run back to Mitzrayim. And they had battle. A few weeks later, they have a battle with Amalek, right? And like what's But the Maisa is the battle for Eretz Yisrael was different. The battle for Eretz Yisrael was different than the battle for Amalek or the battle for Midian or all these miraculous wars where Moshe stood up and raised his hand, and it was a natural battle, with the exception of the walls of Yericho falling in. And then the Yehuda talks about why you had to have that one miracle, but in general speaking, it was a natural process, because once the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael, the era of a miraculous life had stopped. The whole point of Eretz Yisrael was that life was normal, and that to serve Hashem in the course of normal life. Midbar wasn't normal life. Tziyas Mitzrayim wasn't normal life. Midbar, when your food is the man, and you're drinking from the water of the well of Miriam, and you're surrounded by Anani Akavod, that's not normal life. And the Mulchamas then also weren't natural Mulchamas. And in general, they had the Anan. Even when Amalek came, Vayizana B'cha was only able to catch a few Yidden that were outside of the cloud. Mm-hmm. And suddenly Yidden. So that's what Hashem says, that when they go into if they're going to go into Eretz Yisrael right now, Derech Plishtim, they're going to go there. They're going to see Mulchama, real Mulchama. They're going to go running back to Mitzrayim.
They're not used to it.
No, they're not used to. In other words, they're used to all these miracles, and they're used to the sea splitting and the makis. You show them a real Mulchama. They're not. So therefore, take them into the desert. Let them wait 40 years. After 40 years, then they'll be ready to go and go to the Mulchama. At that point, anyways, they'll have forgotten Mitzrayim. They're not going to be running back to Mitzrayim in 40 years from now. But it was all part of the plan.
Nobody's there for that door. Everybody died.
Correct. So that's Bepashtos. But Abipnimis and Yanim, the Milchama began in Eretz Yisrael. Not only the Milchama against the physical, that's when the battle began. The battle with the Yetzer Hara. You know, the 7 nations of Canaan represent the seven midas of the Nefesh Bahamas. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. The battle of life, the battle of
the real life.
The real life. So it wasn't just that the enemy within, not only the Milchama against the enemy within also began really in Eretz Yisrael. Because until then, the Midbar, as we mentioned, was their day. They were a very spiritual generation. So they didn't. So I'm saying the physical Milchama was a reflection of the spiritual war. So only when they went into Eretz Yisrael, after the 40 years, that's when the battle really began. The battle physically against Canaan, but also the internal battles. They entered the real world, and that's when the real world, the battles, that's when Moshe had to come and give him this message of Shema Yisrael and tell him, you should know, You can be battling your nefesh bahamis. You can be battling the internal knaini, prizi, amiri, nivusi, and all these things. You need Shema Yisrael. You need to remember this idea of Mesiras Nefesh. And that's the ultimate weapon in the arsenal. And you think into it. The ultimate weapon in our arsenal against the Nefesh Bahamis, the Yetzer Hara, is bittul.
So why in it it's
1 second. Let me finish the thought.
I'm sorry.
No problem. It's bittul. In other words, usually I want and I feel like doing it, and it's about me, but all that fluctuates. Today I want, tomorrow I don't want. Today I want this much, tomorrow I want that much. The ultimate weapon that we have is the idea I'm a Yid and I want to connect to Hashem. Not I want in a selfish way. There's nothing selfish about the desire. I'm willing to give up my life for it. And this understanding that a Yid ultimately is batal to Hashem and nullified, that is the ultimate weapon that we have in our battle against Yetzer Hara. With this, my friends, we have finished chapter 25 in Tanya. It's not only that we finished chapter 25, but we finished major part of Tanya. Next week we start from chapter 26, which is a completely new idea. And we start talking about Simcha. And we have 8 or 9 chapters. Chapters 26 through 34. How many chapters is that? 9, right? They're devoted to Simcha and how to be b'Simcha. Very powerful prak in which we're going to be moving into. And to a certain extent, we've finished the battles. We've laid out in the first few chapters of Tanya, we've laid out, the internal psyche of the Yid, the Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Bahamis, and the different components. How do we battle the Nefesh Bahamis? We've developed 2 paths. One is the Chabad path, which is starting with the mind, developing feelings, which lead to Machshava Diber Maisa. And then we've developed this other battle plan, which is based on the Ava Misoteres. So we already know who we are. We know how to battle the Nefesh Bahamis. And next week we're going to learn about something new entirely, which is the need for Simcha. And next week we're also going to figure out why Simcha is so important. Yeah.
My question is, why we don't start that tefillah with Shema? If Shema is so important that Moshe Rabbeinu told Bnei Israel when he went to Israel, start that tefillah with Shema. Why are you waiting after Baruch Shamar, after Ishtabach, and before Shemona? Shema is so important, I start that tefillah with Shema.
Why don't you start your Shabbos meal with chant?
And I vomit after that.
It's the best part of the meal, no?
That's part of the meal. That's the dessert.
The answer is, I don't know if this applies to chant, but at least in terms of Shema, is that if you want the Shema to be the way it's supposed to be, you can't just, okay, Shema Yisrael. Actually, the first part of davening is getting you to the mood that by the time when you get to Shema, you're holding at the level to say Shema, talk about the greatness of Hashem. And all these things warms you up. That's really what it is. Shema is the main part of davening. But to get there, it's a journey. Davening is Hine Sulam Mutzav Artza V'Reishim Hagia Shemaim. Davening is a ladder. And Shema is step 3 of the ladder. You have to have the first step. So again, the ultimate step is Shema Esrei, that's step 4. But before then, you have to have Psuki de Zimra and Birchas Kriyat Shema, and only then are you ready to get to Shema.